You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
For the community, by the community.
Celestial greetings. I'm Janet Booth, a professional astrologer from West Hartford, Connecticut, and welcome to my program on astrology called Looking Up. If I am correct, this is my 15th anniversary on West Hartford Community Television. I believe my initial show was December 2000. So, wow! And I want to just say before I start, even though this will be broadcast in December, I'm taping in November, right before Thanksgiving, and I just want to be grateful. I want to be thankful that there is such a thing as television, which I've enjoyed since I was 3 years old. And I am grateful that there's such a thing as local cable access for people to have by the community, for the community, like we do here on West Hartford Community Television. And I'm thankful very much for WHC-TV and the wonderful staff here. And if you're thinking of your end of the year giving, I want to encourage you to include the station in that. And I also want to give a special shout out to my friend who is going to be volunteering in other ways, other places, but I've enjoyed his cameraman services for many years here at Looking Up, Marsh Weiss. Thanks, Marsh. And you know what? I hope I'm as active and vibrant and fun and interesting when I'm in my 90s as you are. You're an inspiration. He likes to say on his emails, old age is no place for sissies, and I know that's true. So that's my little thanks to everybody. And I also want to mention before I get going that if you're listening to Looking Up on a regular basis, and I throw out the astro lingo because it is another language, that on my website, astrologybooth.com, you can get my Astrologer's Apprentice cheat sheet in the study booth beginners topics, and that has nice keywords in English for all kinds of things that are the main building blocks of astrological sentences. I also want to encourage you while you're there, you can go to the very bottom of any page and sign up to follow my blogs, and you can get the daily rating, 1 through 5. 1 is the worst, 5 is the best, with the daily message from Janet's Planets, free in your email every day. You can also download a fancy bar chart that's all of the zigzags called retrogrades of the planets for 2016, also all of the new and full moons, the dates, and the degrees. So I'm going to be talking about some fairly volatile kind of things that are going on in December and into the new year. And I had originally intended to make this program all about the forecast for 2016. Well, we'll get to more of that next month and as we go into the months of 2016. I think first of all we have to concentrate on understanding and getting through December 2015, because as I tape this in November, we've just had the horrific ISIS attacks in Paris, and you know, things are kind of shaky. So many times people get fearful and they react out of a place of fear, and I want to encourage you to think positively. And one of my favorite inspirations for thinking positively is Louise L. Hay. You may have heard of her. She's in her 80s. She cured herself of breast cancer. She went on to become a force in the metaphysical world and in the publishing side of the metaphysical world. And she's also the mentor of Wayne Dyer, who you may have heard of, who's very big on power of positive thinking, and he just passed away this year. Well, Louise has this great book that I look at almost every day. She has another one called You Can Heal Your Life, but this one is Meditations to Heal Your Life. And it's just beautifully illustrated. There's one concept per page. And I want to just look at this one about fear. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I opened it up this morning, and she shows the beautiful sunshine. And she says, when she has fears, she tries to think of the sunshine and how the sun is always shining, even when there's clouds. And I choose to remember the light. I feel secure in the light. And when fears come, I choose to see them as passing clouds in the sky, and I let them go on their way. So that's what I want you to do. When you feel fears arising, feel the fear and move on and do what you got to do anyway. There's also a great book, and I listened to the book on tape, Susan Jeffords, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. So with that as a preface, we'll look quickly at December and talk maybe a pinch about 2016. December starts off in a kind of nice way. There's one of these magical triangles that's, I call a nickname cutie, but it's quintile triangles. Things are a fifth and 2/5 apart in the sky, and they work kind of magic together. And it's Mercury, the mind planet, with Mars, the action planet, and Neptune, the envisioning planet. Well, Neptune, on one end of the spectrum is faith, on another end of the spectrum is fears. This working positively is going to help us have more faith than fears, but we may have to remember that sunshine, like Louise says. And it's maybe a time for us to talk about what our dreams and our visions are. This pattern is exact on December 6th and 7th, but it will be active for a couple of days before and after that. And it's nice that we have this pattern because there's also some, let's say, kind of trouble that Mars is getting into at the same time. From the 6th to the 10th, Mars is bumping into our long-term, slow, ongoing 90-degree at cross purposes friction between crazy Uranus and transformative Pluto. And this goes back to 2011, very strong from 2012 to 2015, and it doesn't give up the ghost till about 2018. So it's part of a 138-year cycle that started in the 60s. And if you remember the 60s, there was protests, there was civil rights, there was women's rights, there was Medicare coming in, all kinds of things that were changing the fabric of at least American culture, and I'm sure in other countries there were parallel types of things. So when we see this quarter of that cycle phase come up at this thing called a square, the 90 degrees, it can be made into what's called a T-square when something else is across from one of the points. And that's what we have going on now. Mars is the planet of fighting and arguments, but in December it's going through the peaceful, harmonious sign of Libra, so it's kind of quelled a little bit in its aggressiveness. But still, when it bumps into the Uranus-Pluto and makes that T-square, there's likely to be flare-ups, or perhaps there's more like negotiations, heated discussions that are going to help lead to some change. We've had 3 times a year and a half ago, Mars was also making a T-square with Uranus and Pluto, but from Cancer. And it was especially intense the second out of the 3 times, and that was around 4/23. And I looked up what was happening in the news around then, because I wanted to be reminded. And I find, you know, some people complain about Wikipedia, but it does have a nice month-by-month and even day-by-day summary of what's going on, and so does another website called infoplease.com. And so you can oftentimes, when you're looking up what's happening astrologically, see things there. So let's see. During that period, within a few days, U.S. drone strikes kill 30 al-Qaeda in Yemen. Pro-Russian unrest in the Ukraine, ongoing. Washington accuses Moscow of fomenting unrest in the eastern Ukraine, and Obama threatens additional sanctions. Ferry capsized in South Korea. Earthquake 6.6 in British Columbia. Palestinian rival factions Fatah and Hamas reconcile to form a unity government. Israel suspends peace talks then with the Palestinians. See themes about war and peace, because Mars is the god of war. 425, bombings in Iraq, Palestine, India. 425, North Korea detains a U.S. tourist. So you can kind of get the idea that usually there is some kind of unrest, but even the idea of the earthquake, Uranus is shakeups. Pluto is deep in the earth. It rules long, slow things like tectonic plate movements that all of a sudden have sudden shifts, which is a Uranus-Pluto kind of thing. And I don't know that we've actually had more big earthquakes these last several years, but it seems to be that there's kind of a theme. So what's nice about this time when Mars makes that T-square, at least it's happening over 4 days instead of one intense day like it was in April of 2014. So then we come to our new moon on December 11th, and that has Mars exactly across from Uranus. That T-square is very, very strong, and the moon and sun, which are always together at a new moon, are kind of making their own 90-degree friction with this little asteroid. We don't call it a planet, I think it deserves that, called Chiron. And Chiron is nicknamed the wounded healer. It exposes weak links that need to be addressed and healed. It's also indicator of problem solving, think outside the box, innovate. So if we're lucky, our 4 weeks that start December 11th are going to have some serious innovation in there, but there might also be, again, exposing of the weak links. And then we have not a whole lot happening in a big way for a week. Woo! Get your Christmas shopping done or your holiday shopping done there between about the 12th and the 18th before some of the other stuff gets rocking and rolling, because just as Mars had activated that Uranus-Pluto, Mercury moves into position and it's going to join Pluto and do the square with Uranus on the 19th to the, I think, 20th. Oh yeah, well, within 2 days. Boom, boom. Mercury's fast. So Mercury's getting ready to do another one of those zigzag things called retrograde, where it looks optical illusion in the sky like it backs up over several degrees, even though it's still always hurtling forward in space. And when it does that, there's like a sector of the zodiac comes by, it looks like it stops. It goes back, it looks like it stops. It comes forward again. In that little range, it passes 3 times. So it can hit on other planets or something in your chart 3 times. And when it does that, it's nice if you can use that energy for sort of a short-term project. You get something rolling during that first period before it backs up. You do your revisions or some research further into it during the backup. When it comes forward again, you kind of tie up the loose ends. So you might think in terms of that. But we've also got 3 times that Mercury is going to join that Pluto. Well, what does Mercury-Pluto mean? Powerful words, change of thinking, powerful words that lead to a change of thinking. So you may have the ability to implement new ideas in your life through your own, between your own 2 ears. You know, when I spoke about Louise Hay and Wayne Dyer and affirmations, it brings up that idea of how important our thoughts are, and even our words. You might be familiar with the experiments of the Japanese scientist Dr. Emoto, E-M-O-T-O. He took 2 jars of water. One jar he said to the water, "I hate you, you're ugly." One he said, "I love you, you're beautiful." Then he put molecules under the huge microscope, and the "I hate you" water was all in gnarly molecules. And the "I love you" water was crystal structures like beautiful snowflakes. So it reminds us that we're largely water. Our planet is largely water. We need to say good words to ourselves, to each other, to our planet. So at the same time that we're having this Mercury joining Pluto, remember it's squaring to Uranus. And Uranus is kind of said to be a higher octave of Mercury, or they're both related to brain activity and intelligence, things like that. But Uranus has kind of a staccato impact. It rules electricity and lightning. So when Mercury is in friction with that, it's sort of like, mind goes faster than mouth can form syllables, and we have trouble getting our thoughts out. Or there's a side to Uranus where it kind of like know-it-all. So you want to be very careful not to ruffle feathers by acting very opinionated. And actually, Mercury rules eyes, hands, and with friction from Uranus, you might get eye-hand coordination being off. Now, one of the things that's a blessing is our friend Chiron, the healer part of its nickname, Wounded Healer, because for a lot of the time, or maybe most or all of the time actually, that Uranus and Pluto are in their 90 degrees, Chiron is 30 from Uranus, 60 from Pluto, and the 30, 60, 120 combinations in astrology are considered smooth and harmonious. So somehow Chiron wants to say, okay, we're going to have all this big change that comes in spurts and crazy ways, but it's all in the end for some kind of healing or improvement of the things that are our weak links. So we find right at the solstice on the 21st, Mercury is making a nice connection with this Chiron, and that sets up things that go forward into the whole season of the winter. So we do have, Mercury with Pluto squaring Uranus, but Chiron is intervening and trying to help us do something good with this. So let's see what I wrote in Janet's Planets. A smart, realistic perspective offers solutions and keeps us from causing problems due to misperceptions or misinformation. Kind, healing words are offered. Okay. Well, also, at this solstice, when the sun enters into Capricorn, that exact minute is the winter solstice. You can erect a chart right for that time. It happens on the 21st at 11:48 p.m. That's Eastern time. And one of the key features we see is this moon in Taurus. Moon in Taurus grounds us. It's said to be exalted there, like it works its best, because the moon is very changeable. It looks different every day, it rises a different time every day. But Taurus is the most stable and grounding of signs. It slows things down. It gives us some patience. Oh boy, do we need that. And it gives us practicality. So I'm hopeful that we're going to have some of that come into play. Oh, and it's working very nice with Chiron. Yippee! Because the other thing that's happening right exactly on the winter solstice, I mean almost exact to the second, Neptune, the planet about so many things, beliefs, faith, I mentioned fears before, but also images, symbols, dreams, visions, non-reality. It's making a half square, 45 degrees, which is friction like the square, with Eris. Eris is that crazy new little dwarf planet out past Pluto that when they discovered it a few years ago, it threw the astronomers into a tizzy and they had to redefine what a planet was, and they downgraded Pluto. Okay, so Neptune and Eris have done this twice before. A lot of times we get 3 repetitions because of the zigzag. And it did this in February of 2015 and September of 2015. So I didn't get the right date. See, Neptune fooled me when I looked up the February one. But the most recent one that we can talk about from early September, this would be like right after Labor Day, refugees fleeing Syria. This fits so much with the symbolism because Neptune can represent the downtrodden, and Eris is the dwarf planet of chaos and discord. So the chaos in Syria have led to people being, fleeing and needing help. And charitable help is another Neptune thing. Fears again. ISIS beheads second American journalist. In Yemen, the Houthis take advantage of the instability. And a ceasefire began in the Ukraine. Well, We may have some things that connect to this either around the winter solstice or in the winter season, because it kind of harks back to this. But Eris does seem to work best when it's in those friction relationships. And if you're interested in looking at that throughout U.S. history, I would point you to a fascinating little book by Thomas Canfield called Yankee Doodle Discord, which is about Eris. And he also has Eris in signs, houses, and aspects. So Eris is a lot about women's rights, and I think I've spoken to you about this before, but it's in Aries, the sort of friction and fighting and forwardness and assertive and aggressiveness for over 100 years, from around the time the women got the vote into the 2040s. So we'll find that there might be either oppressed women or oppressed people who are, you know, causing disruptions and things like this. And immediately Mars and Mercury are kind of plugging into that Eris and Neptune on Christmas Day. Oh my goodness. And Christmas Day has Uranus ground to a halt, apparent motion, where the planet is stronger when it looks motionless. So craziness, surprises are more apt to happen around a couple of days before and after that. And what else is on Christmas? Oh my goodness. Strange Christmas presents that the planets have for us this year. We have a full moon on Christmas. And that full moon is going to be in the sign of Cancer. And it's very close to the United States Venus, which is a money planet. So this may have some strong effects and maybe some crazy things going on around finances and money in the U.S. markets and things like that around Christmas time. Fortunately, this moon in Cancer is also very kind of warm feelings, nurturing, good for family. So it's nice in that sense for Christmas. And there's also a very kind of calming or joyful aspect. Mercury, our thoughts and communication planet, in that 120 helpful connection with Jupiter, which can be very uplifting and optimistic. But you know, as we're looking into 2016, Jupiter's not always the best planet. It has this reputation of, you know, the benefic, the beneficial one. But it's just a big planet. It makes things bigger. Sometimes it makes problems bigger too. And it's going to be causing some of those in 2016. So let's see. The year ends with Venus in Sagittarius. That's nice for being in touch with people far and near and being hopeful about your relationships. And usually significant others are getting along well, and we're hopeful about financial matters. However, you know, as we go into 2016, we're going to have still a continuation of this Uranus square Pluto. It's officially over. It will never be exactly 90 degrees again, but it's within 5 degrees very frequently, like through May of 2016 and starting up again, I think, end of November into 2017. But Jupiter, like I just mentioned, is going to magnify it because it's going to move into Libra later in the year. Right now it's in Virgo, and when it does that, it's going to make a T-square similar to the one that Mars is making in December. Jupiter is also, I guess, in the near term, or the first half of the year, going to be lining up across from Chiron. So it's either going to promote bigger hurts or bigger healing, or some of each. This Neptune and Eris, that semi-square, is still continuing to be active until February. And a big thing in 2016 is Uranus, crazy Uranus, is going to catch up to Eris. Uranus has been moving through Aries for, I don't know, 3-4 years or something more now, maybe 5. It spends about 7 years in each sign. And Eris is at around 23 degrees. So when Uranus gets to 23, 3 times zigzag back and forth with Eris. And I think those are going to be major times about more in the streets kind of stuff. We've had that already with Black Lives Matter. And I mean, years ago we had Occupy Wall Street. More along that line, but I think it's going to be really a lot about women's issues, not specific like racial issues, or we might have that too. Another big thing that is coming, and we'll talk more about that one when we're in 2016. But we mentioned about Neptune ruling kind of non-reality. And we're going to have Saturn moving into a square with Neptune. Saturn is the reality principle, so it's kind of like reality comes and slaps delusion right upside the head. And that's a good thing. It may kind of work both ways. Each planet works on the other. So Saturn has structure and rules, and Neptune goes, oh, be softer about those, or wash those away. And Neptune goes, oh, I'm very formless. I'm, you know, like the ocean. There's no walls in the ocean. But Saturn says, well, we have to have some rules around these things that have been too nebulous. So I'm actually, in a way, looking forward to this square. And that's, again, part of a cycle. The cycle started in 1989-ish, which was around when the Berlin Wall came down and the Cold War ended and Russia split, or the former USSR split into different states. So I'm thinking that some of what goes on in 2016 has to do with the Cold War again, which is sort of war and not war, reality and non-reality. Now let me speak for a moment about health matters with Neptune, because Neptune rules all the things that are unseen. And in our body, it can rule germs. And it also rules the endocrine system and the glands, the messages that our parts of our body are sending around. And it's very related to the immune system. So since we're going to have compromised Neptune, first by Eris, later by Saturn, very important for you to keep your immune system in tip-top shape. And if that means your vitamins and your sleep and all those kinds of things. And guess what? Neptune rules sleep. Neptune rules medications, whether that's pharmaceuticals or street drugs or even, you know, self-medicating with alcohol. All of those things are under this sort of umbrella of Neptune. So you may want to take a look at, you know, what prescriptions are you on if you are? What are the side effects that? Know what those side effects are, because you might have a harder time with them when chaotic Eris is acting on Neptune. And this kind of brings me back also to the whole idea about fears versus faith, and how your faith may be somewhat rocked during 2016. But you need to remember the sunshine, like Louise Hay says. And I also want to mention how religion comes under the auspices of Neptune as well. So we're going to see more crazy stuff, and not just on the jihadi side from Islamic extremists, but we have Christian extremists right in this country who are acting crazy on their fears and forgetting what their Lord really told them. So I like to call them hippo-Christians. That's a word I came up with some years ago, and I like it. You know, it's like, well, who would Jesus hate? So when you see people being unchristian but calling themselves that, I want you to call them out on that, and you be part of the reality principle that slats them upside their deluded heads. So we'll talk more about that, but I do want to encourage you to look within, find the love, be peaceful even when we have grating and friction. And, you know, around Christmas there is some, you know, fight kind of tendencies with Mercury and Mars. So be the sunshine and enjoy 2016 when we'll see more looking up.